My dad's favorite food was Taco Bell. And I actually have a picture that I came right in front of my desk. And it's both of us just eating Taco Bell together.
Corey Hamada clings on to the few happy memories he shared with his dad, Dave Hamada, who was diagnosed with younger-onset Alzheimer's when he was just 41 years old.
He would put clean dishes in the refrigerator. The peanut butter would be in a linen closet. He had been showing signs. It had been his biggest fear.
Michelle says Dave has had a family history of this devastating disease.
His mom had Alzheimer's, his grandmother, both of his sisters, his aunt also had it. It's a Japanese gene, actually, very uncommon.
The mother of three struggled when the family's breadwinner eventually lost his job.
I've only ever worked part-time. We're not pulling in a salary, and yet we're not getting payment for any type of care that he might need in the house. And our oldest son was in his last year of high school when Dave stopped working. So yeah, it was definitely a financial burden.
Fortunately, the Hamadas' long-term care insurance kicked in, and Corey helped his mom as a primary caregiver.
I was making dinner, making sure that we both ate, as well as getting ready for bed and taking showers, brushing teeth.
What was the most difficult part about being a caregiver?
Probably knowing that there was a loss of dignity for Dave. I remember Dave looking in mirrors, and he'd wave at the guy that he saw in the mirror.
She says as the disease progressed, her husband began to turn violent.
Corey just trying to help him move along at a little faster pace than Dave was wanting to. I know a couple of times he'd push him up against the wall.
I remember a lot of fighting, having all these different kinds of conflict.
Was there a time when you looked at your husband and you were like, this is not the person I married?
Yeah, I think there was a slow process of maybe emotional separation that had to take place. I had to wrap my mind around the fact that I was a single parent and I was doing this on my own.
But Michelle recalls a rare moment when the husband she knew briefly returned.
He asked me if the boys were home, and he asked me to gather up the boys, and I did, and we all came around him, and he said he wasn't afraid to die, and that he didn't know what his future held, but he knew who held his future. And he told them that there would be a time where he'd not be able to live at the house anymore.
That day came soon afterwards when Dave suffered a seizure.
I was in 7th grade. I remember just looking at my dad, and he was just saying that everything is going to be okay. I just have that picture so well ingrained in my memory because it was such clarity, at least from the way that I saw that moment.
Michelle says leaving her husband behind at a care facility was the most difficult thing she has ever done.
Coming to terms with the fact that even though we're one, we're now in two different places, and I'm sure he was often scared.
She visited Dave twice a day, still caring for him the best way she could.
I was probably the only one who could really get him, I could speak sternly to him without him getting aggravated. I could physically help him take off his shirt and put on his pajamas or help him get into the shower.
And to her delight, Dave never forgot her.
Whenever he saw me, the first thing he would say is, "Hi, Mom." Not because I was his mom, but that's just what we called each other with the kids. But I know there came a time when he didn't recognize the boys. It was hard to think of how hard that was for them. I knew Dave's heart. I knew Dave's heart was completely, wrapped up in them.
Dave Hamada passed away at the age of 51 on February 12, 2013.
When he passed, I remember thinking, I can't believe I live in a world that Dave Hamada doesn't live in anymore. I couldn't fathom what that kind of world looked like.
He had passed away before I had graduated high school. I didn't realize that till later on, that sometimes the best way to love someone isn't necessarily in all the things that you do, but just being with that person. I think if I had the ability to go back in time, I think I would have just been a lot more present in those moments. I think that was the hardest thing for me after he had passed, was just knowing I don't get any of those moments back.
5 years later, the Hamadas are moving on, but Dave's picture still sits prominently in their living room.
There's still times today where I go to Taco Bell and I still get 2 beef chalupas and cinnamon twists because that was what my dad and I always got.
The Hamadas volunteer their time raising awareness about younger onset Alzheimer's.
My 3 boys and my nieces and nephews all have a 50% chance of having inherited this gene. So in that sense, I have a very vested interest in how the science and research goes.
And they urge others, especially Asian Americans, to reach out for help if they're going through a similar experience.
Reaching out to people, it's not an easy thing, especially in the Japanese culture, but I think that that's so important because we're really not doing it on our own strength. We're doing it because other people are praying for us and other people are supporting us.
In Torrance, Christine Lee, Kimbap TV.